case. So I'm sorry, that's where we disagree with the gentleman. And I just wanted to say one other thing. I mean, and I'm sorry the gentleman left, but talking about, saving taxpayers, reducing the debt by $500 billion in this package, I'm sorry. I mean, that's laughable when you look at the fact that you added $4 trillion to the debt in the big ugly bill. Now, maybe that kind of funny math works in Texas, but I don't think it works anywhere else in this country. I mean, that's an insult to the American people's intelligence to somehow say that we're being responsible in terms of reducing the debt, when you add $4 trillion to the debt in the big ugly bill. And I thank the gentlelady. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Like you, I will not be voting for this package. From last week to now, nothing on the ground has changed significantly. We cannot give DHS and ICE a blank check and hopes that things will work out in 2 weeks. That approach fails to meet the moment, and it fails to meet the concerns of an overwhelming majority of Americans who want an immediate end to the violence, lawlessness, and chaos caused by ICE across this country. Look, we need look no further than the habeas corpus case involving 5-year-old Liam, the boy in the blue bunny ears hat, who was detained with his father in Minnesota and shipped off to a detention center in Texas. Trump campaigned on a promise that he would deport the worst of the worst. And if that's what were actually happening, I don't think we would be in anything like this position, but that is not what is happening. 5-year-old Liam is a child, a now traumatized child. He is clearly not the worst of the worst, and neither is his father, who was the excuse for detaining Liam as well. His father has no criminal record, either in the United States or in Ecuador, where he came from. He lawfully applied for asylum in this country. He followed all of our rules and laws. He applied through the app provided by Customs and Border Patrol. He followed all the rules. And he was making his appointments here in the US. He was working as a construction worker to support his family. They were not public charges. So this is a big, ugly, violent charade that we are seeing out on the streets of America, run by Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller, and President Donald J. Trump. Our colleague from Texas says nothing has changed between when these bills passed and the present time. Well, I think what has changed is the hypocrisy of this administration's detention efforts has been exposed. And I just wanted to cite the court opinion in little Liam's case. It's very brief, but very powerful. And the court called out that hypocrisy. The court said, and I quote, "This court and others regularly send undocumented people to prison and orders them deported, but do so by proper legal procedures." He said the problem in this case is it has its genesis in the ill-conceived and incompetently implemented government pursuit of daily deportation quotas, apparently even if it requires traumatizing children. And Madam Chairwoman, I would ask that I seek unanimous consent to introduce into the record the 3-page opinion from the Texas District
Without
Court.
objection, Ms. Scanlon, thank you.
Thank you. Look, even after the shooting deaths and even after exposing what happened to little Liam, whose family did not commit any crimes, ICE is still in Minneapolis. Trump is threatening to send ICE to more cities. On Saturday, ICE agents tear-gassed and pepper-sprayed peaceful labor union marchers in Oregon. ICE agents are still abusing citizens and non-citizens alike. Federal agents are still kidnapping people and children, holding people at gunpoint, citizens and non-citizens alike, and raiding people's houses without warrants. They seem to be becoming even more emboldened to commit these acts rather than backing down, and certainly the administration and Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller are not forcing them to do so. So it's up to us. We've seen ICE collecting data on peaceful protesters, exercising their First Amendment rights, putting them in government databases so they can be harassed. They're abusing people in detention facilities, denying detainees medical care. which has led to avoidable deaths, including one of my constituents. He wasn't one of the 32 people who died in ICE custody last year. He died in ICE custody along with, I think we're up to 6 or 7 now, this year, just a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to vote to give any more money to ICE and to Kristi Noem until we enact concrete laws that can stop the unlawful conduct and violence that ICE is inflicting on America. ICE needs to get out of Minneapolis, no more invasions of city, no more breaking into people's houses, no more arrests without warrants. This week, it's up to Republicans whether the government shuts down. It's their majority. I'm not going to carry their water. We won't be complicit in funding ICE while this utter lawlessness continues. Look, earlier this year, Republicans gave ICE billions in their big, ugly bill. They're not going to be hanging out, with a tin cup on the corner looking for money if this doesn't pass right now. But at the same time, our Republican colleagues wouldn't spend a dime on extending the ACA tax credits. 3 months ago, House Republicans refused to extend those tax credits when they passed the prior package of appropriations bills, but they promised to work on the ACA tax credit issue after that round of appropriations passed. I think the Speaker said he's going to spend the whole first quarter doing that. Well, the tax credits expired, and House Republicans have not advanced a plan to reduce costs for the millions of Americans who now can't afford their health coverage. On Wednesday, just this past Wednesday, I met with the folks who manage enrollment for Pennsylvania's ACA marketplace, and I heard how many people have lost coverage because of Congress's failure to extend the tax credits. I met with a small business owner whose premiums for his family, including 4 kids, have increased from $1,900 to $3,000 a month. They're paying $36,000 a year for health insurance, a $12,000 increase. Small businesses can't absorb that. It's insane. He doesn't think he can afford to keep his coverage, and he's considering dropping it. But House and Senate Republicans don't care. They're not taking up the bill that we did force through the House. So pardon me if I don't trust a deal with ICE and DHS abuses being addressed if we just push these spending bills through, when they still haven't dealt with the ACA tax credit system, which they promised to do after the last push. It's a little bit like Lucy and Charlie Brown. I'm not seeing the football get pulled aside again. Look, they're rushing through these spending bills. They're refusing to end the government-funded violence in our streets, all the while letting working Americans drown in rising health care costs. What does it say about this Congress that it would rather give masked, armed agents billions of dollars while denying health care to working people? We are better than this. I sincerely hope we can find a path forward for the spending bills this week, but until then, I oppose this package. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cole, I know the Democrats want to focus on immigration and customs enforcement, but this is the whole Department of Homeland Security appropriation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so I know that there was an unfortunate accident off of Massachusetts. U.S. Coast Guard performed the search and rescue mission. Unfortunately, they did not find any survivors. That was just a couple of days ago. I think a week ago, the U.S. Coast Guard icebreaker had to go help a cruise ship that was stranded in the ice. Is that correct?
I don't know those two incidents.
Okay, well, it is correct.
Pretty normal, I'm sure it is.
It is correct. But my point is this: Department of Homeland Security is much bigger than immigration and customs enforcement.
It's absolutely correct.
I mean, they're forcing a continuing resolution on the United States Coast Guard. I mean, that's what they're doing. It's Customs and Border Protection is bigger than ICE. I mean, we know that Democrats want open borders. That's what they had under the Biden administration. They allowed, millions upon millions upon millions of people into this country illegally. We have no idea who is in this country. But aside from immigration and customs enforcement, you've got Customs and Border Protection, which is Border Patrol. You've got the Transportation Security Administration, who does a tremendous number of things. Most people know them as the ones that run security at the airports. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
Okay. I've already mentioned the U.S. Coast Guard. You've got the Secret Service that's also under Department of Homeland Security. You've got what's known as CISA, the Critical, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. You've got FEMA, which is also under Department of Homeland Security. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Citizenship and Immigration, which is not ICE, but does deal with citizenship and immigration. And then you've got the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers. All of these are under Department of Homeland Security, correct?
Correct.
And when you do the continuing resolution, what does it do to those agencies as well? Does the continuing resolution impact the U.S. Coast Guard?
It certainly does.
I mean, the bottom line is this is a ridiculous demand from the Democratic Party that we have a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security. The only thing this is better than is a shutdown, but we're going to be right back here in 2 weeks. And I'm sorry that 2 people were shot and killed. I really am. I wish it hadn't happened. It's not lost on me that they happen not just in the same state, but the exact same city. And my understanding right now is that ICE is carrying out operations around the country. ICE isn't just operating in Minneapolis, are they, Mr. Cole?
That's correct.
But the difference is, in other states, even if they are a Democratic-run state and a Democratic-run city, those mayors and those governors are allowing the local law enforcement agencies to do their job. And in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, my understanding is that those local law enforcement agencies have been given orders not to do their job. And while I'm sorry that the gentleman is deceased, the fact of the matter is he should have been arrested and put in jail when he kicked out the taillight of the vehicle that the officers were in. And the Democrats don't want to talk about that. And so I intend to vote for the legislation, Mr. Cole. I think that those of us who want this country to move forward and our economy to move forward will continue to vote yes. My understanding is, and I think this is actually a good thing, that the Homeland Security bill that passed the House of Representatives actually had de-escalation training for immigration and custom enforcement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And by doing what the Democrats have done, they have stopped the de-escalation training for immigration and custom enforcement. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I think that the de-escalation training is important, and I wish they had not stopped it. I wish that the de-escalation training was there. I hope it'll be in the next piece of legislation that we have, as it was the last. And with that, Mr. Cole, I just want the American citizens to know that DHS is much bigger than immigration and customs enforcement, and they are able to operate effectively, more effectively in other states because they have not been given orders by a radical mayor and a radical governor. The local law enforcement and state law enforcement have not been given orders by a radical governor and a radical mayor not to help from the standpoint of what local law enforcement is supposed to do. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentleman yields back now. Recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse, for his time of questioning.
I think the chairman, Chairman Cole, I presume you agree with what the gentleman from Georgia said. This is a red state, blue state issue. That's your?
No, I did not.
Oh, you said radical governors versus governors not complying with the law.
Hang on, stop. It's not a debate between the two members.
I hear you. I'm
Your
asking Mr.
time.
Cole the question.
Yeah, I mean, try not to put words into Mr. Scott's mouth, but at the same time, it's not Mr. Scott's time.
I thank the chairman. How about we do it this way, Mr. Chairman Cole, I want to read you a quote. Quote, I think the death of Americans, what we're seeing on TV, it's causing deep concerns over federal tactics and accountability. Americans don't like what they're seeing right now. You want to take a guess who might have said that?
No.
The governor of Oklahoma, someone I suspect you know well, Governor Stitt, said that on TV a few weeks ago. So this notion that this is purely an issue in Democratic states with Democratic governors or states with Democratic mayors, clearly across the board you have heard over the course of the last several weeks an outcry among the vast majority of Americans who I think are deeply offended at what they see ICE doing in Minneapolis and beyond. Now, with respect to the gentleman from Georgia, because he talked a lot about the various different sub-agencies within the Department of Homeland Security, I will say he expressed more support for some of these sub-agencies within the department than the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, it sort of is, refrain about FEMA. Secretary Noem has talked about abolishing FEMA. Now we're forced to listen from my colleagues that we must do everything we can to save FEMA from the same people who said nothing when Secretary Noem was discussing abolishing it. Cybersecurity, CISA. The Trump administration has proposed to cut by a third. 1,000 people they're trying to fire at the cybersecurity division. And I'm supposed to take at face value statements from my colleagues that it's outrageous that we would have a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security and the cybersecurity division, that would put them in a tough spot. I think you ought to be complaining to the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Trump administration, not to your Democratic colleagues. I will also say, I wish my colleague from Texas were here, Mr. Roy, and I trust my good friend from Georgia can perhaps relay this to him. Because to hear him somehow tout this bill as an example, as a paragon of fiscal responsibility, is too much to bear, having listened to him on this committee every week for the better part of the last 3 years. Let me read you from the Cato Institute what they say about this bill. Last week, the proposed $1.7 trillion discretionary budget represents a $24 billion increase compared to fiscal year 2025 levels. It is $50 billion above the 2023 Fiscal Responsibility Act's non-binding budget targets, which we, of course, played a part in negotiating, as you all will remember, just a few short years ago. And by the way, this doesn't include the $300 billion that Republicans allocated to the Department of Homeland Security, specifically ICE, and the Defense Department last year in the OBBA. So, you all may have your reasons as to why you think that these bills deserve to be passed. I certainly don't. But fiscal responsibility cannot be one of the reasons. Just full stop. The empirical evidence makes that very clear. Fiscal year 2026 will mark the first year since the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 that Congress will not have statutorily binding spending caps. So spare us talk of fiscal responsibility when this bill ignores that entirely. To say nothing of, by the way, the discussion around earmarks, and this is not meant for the chairman or the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. It's meant more for my colleague from South Carolina and in absentia, who has, again, railed about earmarks every meeting that I've attended, and I guess is prepared to vote on a bill that includes every earmark one could conceive of. $1 million for the elevator repair at New York City's Met Opera. I look forward to understanding how the gentleman from South Carolina, again, talk about paragon of fiscal responsibility, how he justifies that vote for his constituents. In any event, the question that I would like to ask of the chairman and the ranking member relates to, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, because the backstory, of course, with respect to the bill that we're considering today, is in the context of what's happening across the country and the serious objections that you've heard from colleagues on my side of the aisle, myself included, and why I'll be voting against this bill when it comes to the floor tomorrow, if it gets there. Mr. Cole, I wonder, you've heard, I'm sure, from many Democratic colleagues of yours about our belief that Secretary Noem should be impeached. And I wonder if you agree with that, or what you think of impeachment.
I'm not going to speculate on something that hasn't happened, no, I don't agree with that, but if you want to have impeachment, go right ahead. You have the ability to offer a motion to that deal, but that's really not what we're here to discuss.
We're here to discuss
the appropriations process.
I hear you, but
and funding the rest of the government, most of which is unfunded right now. I mean, right now, we are not paying men and women to defend it. We're not paying the air traffic controllers that brought us all here that flew safely. We're not paying the TSA. We're not funding the government. These other things are important, and I think the Senate, I don't agree with what they did, but they said, okay, let's set aside 2 weeks here and only fund this for 2 weeks. The rest of this stuff is really, honestly, extraordinarily important to the country.
Our
What this bill
objections-
does is keep funding that.
I hear you.
And then leave open this other
You
area where
made a
people
very
have
impassioned
concerns.
case on that, and I think you answered my question. As you heard from the ranking member, as you heard from Ms. Scanlon, and I echo their sentiments, there is a complete lack of trust and a loss of trust with respect to what the Trump administration is doing. There are many of us who will not support the appropriation that, whether it's a continuing resolution or the proposed budget that the House passed last week that we all voted against, and many of us who believe that there must be a change in leadership and that Secretary Noem should be the subject of impeachment proceedings. It sounds like you disagree on that latter point. You don't think she should be
Talk about
impeached.
appropriations bills, not impeachment. That is not the subject in front of us right here. That's not got anything to do with any of the bills we're working on. Simply trying to fund the government.
That
you know,
sounds like
to
a maybe.
drag it-
That-
Look, if you want to have a theatrical debate.
It's not a
about
theatrical
not-
debate.
Yes, it is, because it doesn't have anything to do with any of this legislation.
It has everything to
It
do with the
has
Department of Homeland
zero.
Security's budget.
If you want to talk about the Homeland Security budget, I'm happy to talk about the budget. It's not an impeachment issue, it's a budgetary issue. And what's proposed.
Is that right?
Is a 2-week, yes, it is.
Okay, let me explain why I think that view is misplaced. Secretary Noem has unlawfully impounded funds in violation of the Impoundment Control Act, right? That relates to the budget that the House and the Senate are passing for the department to implement. She has violated the law. That's not a question. I'll
Okay,
finish
I'm
and I'll
sorry,
give you an
we're passing
opportunity.
a continuing
I'll
resolution.
give you an opportunity.
For 2 weeks, okay. I'm
So,
sorry.
your question was, how does the impeachment of Secretary Noem, or impeachment proceedings against her, concern the Department of Homeland Security budget? And my answer to you is that she has violated the law, in my view, and in the view of many others, in a number of ways as it relates to the money that has been appropriated to her agency. That has included unlawfully impounding funds. That has included obstructing congressional oversight in violation of riders that have been passed in this appropriations bill previously. The record is replete with these examples. That's why I ask you about it. And it's not a gotcha. You answered it. You said you don't agree with it, or you don't think that she should be
If
impeached.
you want to
So
bring an
that's your view.
impeachment resolution, by all means, do so.
And the reason I ask, as you could probably imagine, is that I didn't hear the same reticence from my Republican colleagues, including you, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, a year and a half ago, when all of you seemed very, very eager to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. I'm sure you recall your vote to impeach him, yes?
I certainly did.
Yeah. There was a mad rush on your side of the aisle to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. I didn't hear anybody at the time say that that was an inappropriate use of the time within the House or the ability of members to be able to pursue. And it sounds like
I said it didn't have anything to do with an appropriations bill. That didn't have anything to do with an appropriations bill. That was some measure put in front of me. I voted on it. I don't think you'll find I spoke on it or that it was but comes to the floor of the House, you got an obligation to cast a vote. That's appropriate. All I'm saying is I'm here to talk about appropriations. That's what's in front of us. And it's not the package I would have preferred. It's the package that came over from the United States Senate. I still think passing it is better than not passing it. You and I obviously disagree on that. Fair enough.
I appreciate that. Well, I'll certainly agree with you on that last sentiment, which is that you and I disagree on it. There's no, in my view, basis to continue supporting the lawlessness that the agency, ICE in particular, has been perpetrating against the American people in the context of this appropriations bill, and I'll be voting no on that basis. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Chairman Cole. Building upon what my colleague from Georgia mentioned, I mean, this is not just a vote to fund the Coast Guard, to fund FEMA, to fund TSA. There are also quite a few other measures within this legislation we're seeking to fund. So if you could, in the inverse, explain to the committee and explain to all those watching, a no vote on these Senate amendments to H.R. 7148 equals what?
Well,
it equals voting no to 94% of funding the government. So, you know, as important as Homeland Security and that agency is, and the discussion is, I'm not diminishing that, is it really appropriate not to pay anybody that wears the uniform of the United States that's defending us right now? I don't think that is. Is it appropriate not to fund research at the NIH on cancer and Alzheimer's or people in clinical trials? I don't think that is. Is it appropriate not to provide services to the American people that those of us that are most vulnerable need? Look, this is a huge swath of federal government. This is like, you know, taking a sledgehammer to try and get a fly. I mean, I'm not saying the fly is not important. I'm saying this is about funding essentially almost the entire government of the United States, which we are not doing now. The Senate has acted. It's now up to the House to act. Is this what I would have proposed? No. Is this what my colleague, the ranking member? No. We disagree on a lot of things. Is this the approach I would have taken to the Department of Homeland? No. But I would rather fund everything. I mean, you know, look, there are federal employees in every district in America. They ought to get paid for the work they're doing. They are doing important jobs for the country. Why would we shut down every safety agency? Why would we ask air traffic controllers to keep working without getting paid? Why should we ask scientists that are doing important research? I mean, it is, you know, inappropriate in my view not to fund the government. Most of the issues we're talking about, honestly, aren't appropriations issues. You can deal with them in judiciary. You can deal with them in the committees of jurisdiction. Part of the problem the appropriations process has is that everybody tries to put things on it that don't have much to do with it. So, again, you want to impeach somebody? Fine, file an impeachment resolution. We have a process to deal with that, not dealt with in the appropriations bill. So, again, I'm not going to go home and tell my people that are working hard at Tinker Air Force Base to keep 50 and 60-year-old airplanes flying in combat conditions they shouldn't get paid because Congress is having a fight over something that's totally unrelated to what they do, which is critically important. I'm not going to look at a young service family and tell them, I'm sorry, you've got a 6-year-old in daycare. We're not sure whether or not we can pay you to do. I'm just not going to do that. This is not what I would have preferred, but I'm going to vote to fund the government of the United States and then let us resolve these other issues through negotiation, through legislation, through adjudication if you need to. But shutting down the government is not a good thing to do. And it endangers and harms people who have done absolutely nothing wrong. And it puts the American people at risk. They may even agree with you about the issues you're concerned about in ICE or Homeland Security. Fair, but I bet you they don't agree that the military shouldn't get paid. I don't think anybody in America believes that, or very few people do. And I think they would think you were reckless in running that kind of a risk. And I don't think, you know, people, again, that are simply doing their job, 99.9% of whom work hard, play by the rules, have discharged the things we ask them to do, shouldn't get paid, or the vital research. So it's just, to me, the remedy is out of proportion to the problem that my friends have. And, you know, if you want to shut down the government for the second time in 3 months, you have the ability to do that. I guess the Senate chose not to do that. They chose a different course, not the one I would have chosen. But at least they looked at what we did together with the Senate and said 5 out of 6 of these things we're okay with. Let's get that done. Let's put a 2-week limit on this other and continue this debate and discussion. I would have preferred a longer period of time, but I don't know how they ended up with 2 weeks, but that's where they're at. And so right now, the government of the United States, not this Capitol complex, because we did fund the ledge branch. We have funded we have a number of bills in place, but about, over 70% of the government is unfunded, and people are doing important things for the American people and not getting paid, and they don't have anything to do with what's going on in Minneapolis, one way or the other. So, you know, I grew up in a military family. I grew up with a father that was a military defense worker. After that, had a brother that followed the same course. They worked hard. They played by the rules. They deserve to get paid for what they do when they were doing it. I think the same thing about folks now. You want to have these arguments, discussions, you want to change things, but you don't shut down the government of the United States and freeze everything because you're upset about something that's happened. You deal with that problem within the context of that. You don't shut down the government. But again, people have a vote. They're entitled to do it. And the Senate chose this thing. It's not what I would have preferred, but I think it's better than shutting down the government.
Well, that is very, very well put, Mr. Chairman, and I think that's what everyone should consider when voting on this after we report out the rule tomorrow. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jack. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez, you're recognized.
Hello, Madam Chair, and hello, Chairman and Ranking Member. You know, it's interesting because the other side of the aisle seems to be making the case of why we should restructure Homeland Security, because it's got a lot of different pieces in there that don't make sense together. And so, you know, we should take that up. I'm not sure that we would be able to do that right now in these circumstances, but where we're at right now is that when we were last here, the ranking member and Democrats, together with Republicans, have said, listen, there is so much controversy around Homeland Security, let's separate it out. So we had a vote on the two different bills. But it's Republicans who put them back together and sent them over. So
No,
there's
that's
there's a creation.
If I may, that's actually not quite accurate. The Senate asked for these bills to be put together. That's part of the negotiation. So, yeah, did Republicans put them back together? That was the request of the Senate. And that was the request specifically of my Democratic colleague, Senator Murray. We want all 6 bills together. You wanted it differently in the House, and we accommodated that. The Senate asked for what it got. So please don't blame that on Republicans. Blame it on the Senate, collectively on both sides, you know. But that was the request we got. So, you know, sorry, we sent them what they asked for in the form that they asked for.
So, but
And
what
then
we
they
have-
made a
but what we
decision to
have,
change it,
Chairman-
which they have the right to do. And
But
they've
what we
sent
have,
it
Chairman,
back.
is we have a problem right now because there was support for funding the other agencies, and we talked about the good work. In fact, you were here last time, and we talked about some of the problems. And in fact, I asked you, do you think it's all right that they are arresting Native Americans for immigration offenses and putting them in detention? And you agreed that that's not an okay thing.
Of course not.
That's not okay. And wouldn't you also agree that it's not all right for them to be arresting any American citizens? In fact, Latinos often look like Native Americans, and that's probably why those Native Americans were arrested, because they have darker skin, right?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. But it's not all right to arrest any citizens for
of course
immigration
not.
offenses. And I think that that's the problem, is it's not all right, and they keep doing that. And when they do that, it's a violation of the 14th Amendment. It's a violation of our basic principles of what it means to be a citizen of the United States, is we should not have ICE going around and arresting hundreds. It's over 200 by now. Because the last document we have, it was 170, and that was several months ago. But the other thing that they're doing is they're arresting and pulling people into custody, and then the courts are having to throw them out. 2,300 documented court cases where they are saying you are violating people's due process rights. 2,300. These are court cases. This isn't us lefties or whatever they want to call us. We believe in due process. I would assume you believe in due process as well.
Of course I do,
Okay.
although not really dealt with normally in an appropriations bill. You know, we have all kinds of committees, we have all kinds of legislation. Our legislation is about funding the government.
Right. And when we fund the
did that
government,
in the House. We sent it to the Senate in the way the Senate asked for it to be sent. That's not a legal matter, it's a procedural issue. Nobody's rights are violated by that. We had an agreement with what they would do. They broke that agreement. They have the right to do that. And they've now sent it back to us in another form. So to me, the real question is, do you want to keep the focus on Homeland, which this clearly does, because it's, as my friend, the ranking member, said, about 10 days of funding. That's all that's in here for Homeland. If you want to vote against it, by all means, go ahead. Then there's the funding for the rest of the government, which was negotiated in a bipartisan fashion, and which was agreed upon by, and honestly, majorities of both parties voted for those funding bills. And now you've got exactly the same thing in front of you, the same thing that a majority of your party voted for and a majority of my party voted for. Why shouldn't that get funded? You want to deal with Homeland separately? That's what the Senate has decided to do. They sent it to you separately. But they put it all in one package. They didn't do what we did in the House and separate it out. They could have sent us over five bills. They could have sent us over 5 bills and then sent this as a separate package. I don't know why they decided not to do that, but I'm not willing to jeopardize the entire funding of the rest of the government and not pay military families and not pay federal workers and not pay safety workers and not fund FEMA in the middle of a disaster. I'm not willing to do that because I'm mad about this. And other people are. They have every right to do that. But that's the issue in front of us now.
So, Ranking Member, I think that part of what we're struggling here in this conversation is that this is a bill that will fund Homeland Security. It will fund CBP and ICE. And the idea that we can not ask anything, that we can send over a check and say, but you don't have to do anything, I think that that is, I can't see how that works. For example, last week, or last time you were here, we talked about body cameras, right? There's money in there, but there's no requirement that they be turned on, that they be kept on, and that the footage be available to law enforcement, local as well as federal. That's something that could get included in a funding package. Am I right, Ranking Member?
You're right, but let me just, I'm going to say a couple things because questions haven't been directed to me, so I'm going to take this opportunity to say something. First of all, with the structure and the organization of the Department of Homeland Security, I was appointed to the committee that examined that effort many years ago, and I voted no, particularly because Coast Guard, FEMA, and other pieces were included in that. This was a conglomerate that people rushed to vote for, and my view, a mistake because of those things there. If my colleague, Mr. McGovern, were here, yeah, I passed all 12 bills when I was chair of this, of the Appropriations Committee. I also wanted to say to Mr. Roy, $4.5 trillion cuts that biggest cut for the wealthiest and for the biggest corporations. Give us a break on fiscal responsibility. Kristi Noem, let me be clear, because I have colleagues who asked me this. I said she should be fired, she would resign. If that now was the case, then we could bring impeachment proceedings. So that's where I am on that. Now, we tried to put in guardrails in the House Homeland Security bill. I have a list of them. I won't go through it, but many of the things that have been out there and we've discussed. Citizens, warrants, body cameras, requirements, etc. That was rejected. And that was what 207 of those, and I'll speak by myself and not everybody else. I said, as I said in my opening remarks, I don't think it took into consideration what we need to be doing with regard to ICE. With what we have here, is 5 bills. I have to repeat this, 5 bills. And this is information that I have distributed. Increases the National Institutes of Health. It has state opioid response grants. It has child care and Head Start. It talks about power of the purse, where we got some of that back. And on a bipartisan basis, overwhelming numbers. We rejected the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. Rental assistance is in there. Homeless assistance is in there. Funding to expand air traffic controllers, personnel. 3.8% for military personnel. Bipartisan basis, we said yes No. We came to a conclusion. Did we get everything we wanted? Hell no. Did the Republicans get everything they wanted? Hell no. And that's the 5 bills that are there. Look, I've never wanted to run for the United States Senate, okay? I've been asked in the past, why would I want to go to the other side, to what I call the dark side, you know, where rarely anything gets completed, etc. They came back and they took this thing, and look, we talked about disassociating the two pieces so you could have that strength of your feeling about 5 bills, and you could have the strength of feeling about the Department of Homeland Security bill. And as it was currently structured, and which is something that I am not for. However, what I am for is for the 5 bills that we have passed. And this comes with it's not 2 weeks anymore. There was the 2 weeks. You're now, if this votes on the 3rd, you go to the 13th, it's 10 days. There is not a dime of increase in there for Homeland. It is a continuing resolution, and therefore it is the same. I want the opportunity in those 10 days to talk about what we want to do in reforming ICE, and it is, and that's there. And I will lay out the same things that we've been talking about. You cannot detain American citizens or deport them. You have to have warrants for people's arrest. You have to require body cameras for people. We have to have an oversight capacity of an agency, which I said in my outset is lawless and is a rogue agency, the way it's currently constructed. Does it need to be reformed? Amen, it does. I'll take those 10 days and see what we can get. And at the end of those 10 days, if we can't decide to go with it, then it's a no vote. And Department of Homeland Security is shuttered, but not Labor HHS, not Department of Transportation and HUD, not Defense, not State, not the other 5 bills, because they're good bills with good things for the people that we care about. And I'll fight for those democratic priorities every day of the week and fight against a lawless and a rogue agency that is taking this country, turning it around, and pitting one person against another and killing American citizens in our streets. We have to change that. We have an opportunity. Without it, we will not have an opportunity.
But part of my problem is I keep hearing Republicans say, oh, we can't do that. Oh, we can't put that in appropriations. We can absolutely put it in appropriations, because if we're not going to demand that when they violate the Constitution, Chairman, they said that you cannot, that it's all right to kill somebody because they were carrying a gun, lawfully carrying a gun. And when he was shot down, he was already down, and when he was shot, that gun was no longer in his possession. Do you agree with the idea that you can get shot because you're lawfully carrying a gun?
Of course not.
Right.
I don't
So
think
that's a
any
violation.
American agrees with that.
Of course not. But how do you enforce that? That's the problem. They're violating the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment.
And probably be court cases on this. That's normally how you punish people that break the law. You punish them individually. You don't normally shut down the government of the United States because somebody did something wrong.
Ms.
People do
Ledger
stuff
Fernandez.
wrong all the time.
But
You don't shut down the entire government. And you certainly don't shut down areas where you have negotiated in good faith and have bipartisan,
We're not
bicameral
talking about
agreement.
this. I'm
So if
talking
you want
about
to have
ICE.
this thing, again, I wish the Senate had sent it back separately. They chose. We accommodated them. We accommodated your Democratic colleagues in the Senate. That's what they wanted. That's
But when I'm
they
talking
asked
about
for.
what can we do,
accommodated your
what can we
Democratic
do? And
colleagues
you keep
in
saying
the
we can't
House
do that in
because you
appropriations.
wanted a
We
separate-
absolutely
you
can do
wanted
that in
a separate
appropriations.
vote on it,
Ms.
and we
Ledger
gave you that.
Fernandez.
It was
So-
Republicans and Democrats in the
So,
Senate.
so I think that this is the issue,
Exactly.
Madam Chair.
Republicans.
Republicans and Democrats, but it was specifically a
No,
Democratic.
don't talk over each other, please. We've been doing very well, but
We're
let's
pretty
not talk
passionate.
over each other.
I
I know.
apologize.
This is the Rosa DeLauro we've known to come and love. No. So,
I will wrap
Ms.
up.
Leisure Fernandez, would you wind it up,
Yeah,
please?
I'll wrap it up, but I think that the frustration you are hearing us say is that we are hearing, including from the chairman, these don't belong in appropriations, and my God, if we are funding it, where else do they belong? And especially when you keep violating every single piece of this Constitution, and in 2026 alone, ICE has violated 96 court orders. So, Mr. Chairman, saying this could go through court isn't working. We need to put it in the language of the bill, and we can. We need to make it enforceable. We need to have accountability, and none of that exists right now. And that's the frustration that Americans are feeling, because Trump is going down on this. Americans don't like what happens. They don't like seeing people gunned down in the street. They don't like the idea that, it's about retribution and revenge. You're going into Maine? My God. Really, Oklahoma has more immigrants than Maine does,
Ms. Leisure
right?
Fernandez.
And the
I don't know what
retribution
the
doesn't make any
population
sense.
of Maine is, but we're certainly proud to have a healthy immigration community in our states.
But they're going into Maine because it's a Democratic state, and they're not going into Oklahoma because it's a Republican state, because that's what Trump has said is he's going to
Well,
have
actually,
revenge and
that's not
retribution.
correct. I mean, I was with one of my county sheriffs over the break, and there were ICE operations in Oklahoma. He said, the difference is we cooperate with them here, we work well together. So we haven't had the same experience.
That's
But
not right.
but saying there's not an ICE presence in Oklahoma, I can tell you, it's just not true. There is.
There aren't any surges going on in Democratic states. And Madam Chair, with that, I yield back.
Thank you,
I
Ms.
mean, in
Leisure.
Republican states, there's no surges going on in Republican states, and that tells you everything.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Mr. Norman, you're recognized.
I'll be brief. I think everything's been talked about. You know, what does get me, though, is the left continues to demagogue what happened, the ICE agents, and encourage assaults on police. Yet they stood beside a president who let 15 to 20 million illegals in this country. They stood beside it. They stood behind the children who were left to dry with sex trafficking, didn't say one word about what was happening by the Biden administration that President Trump is trying now to cure. That's what the ICE agents are doing. They're not talking about the 8,000 assault on ICE agents. They're not talking about the young man who unfortunately was killed, but he kicked out a car, a light, tail light in a car. He should have been arrested, but they let him go with the lax rules as a sanctuary city has. It's so hypocritical. But, Mr. Cole, you've been around a long time. What's going to happen in 10 days?
I don't think we know. I mean, I think there'll be a serious negotiation. My guess is there'll probably be an extension. I don't think it'll get settled in 10 days, but I'd love to be wrong about that. And we'll probably be up here with some other short-term CR. What I do, and I agree very much with the ranking member on this, I don't see why the rest of government has to be held hostage to this dispute. I don't see why the military needs to be threatened. I don't see why the NIH needs to be threatened. I don't see why the Department of Education needs to be threatened. I don't see why, as my friend pointed out, rent assistance needs to be threatened. So I don't think those people have much to do with this dispute. And if we have to have this, we'll see. I also think, everybody here has commented, and I actually agree with my friend, ranking member. I wasn't here when Homeland Security was created, but I've seen it as a very ungainly agency with 23 different components, if I remember the number correctly. And I don't think, probably there needs to be, the authorizing committees need to do some pretty serious work and redesign. Again, we don't do that in our committee. That's not our job. Congress has created this entity. Our job is to fund it. We try to arrive at what we think the appropriate level is. We try to put in guardrails. I think we agree sometimes we don't agree, whatever. But the point is, we worked it out and got it done. the Senate broke the agreement. They may feel justified in doing that. They certainly have the ability to do that. So we now have a situation, because they did not do what they agreed to, and because they did not accept the bill in the form that they asked for it in, it's now been kicked back to us with a huge government shutdown underway. And I think we ought to stop that. Most of these areas we agree on, or we've come to an agreement. We ought to take those aside the way any normal people would be and say, I'm not going to punish the American military because I'm mad at something ICE is doing. I'm not going to, disrupt clinical trials at the NIH because I'm going to, these areas we agree, we've come to, let's do that. Keep focused on this and we'll keep working it. But again, a lot of these problems, as my friend suggests, I think are, some of them need to be in court. They don't need to be fought out in a legislative arena. If somebody did something wrong in a case of a law enforcement official did something wrong, then they need to go be punished and or be a trial and be adjudicated, I should say. So I think exploding these things up and derailing the entire government is irrational. I don't think it, is going to work. I thought it was irrational when Republicans did it over Obamacare, as if the whole rest of the government was about Obamacare. It wasn't. This is the same thing here. So we ought to take the areas we can agree on, take those off the table. They're done until September 30th. Let us get about our work for that, sort this other issue out, and go from there. But my guess would be, to get back to my friend's question, I would be surprised if this is solved in 10 days. I would be enormously pleased, but I would be surprised, and I would not be surprised to see us back here with some short-term thing. But let us get most of government done and get back to thinking about next year as well. And, some of the authorization committees, it would be really nice if they just authorized. They just did their work. I can show you a committee. The only authorization committee around here that gives us an authorization bill every year is the House Armed Services Committee. It doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican controlled, they produce a bill that covers everything they spend. No other committee comes close, not remotely close. So if they want to restructure these agencies and change, there's plenty of work to do. They can get right at it.
I think the preview of coming attractions will be the next 10 days. Will be demagogue and Christie Nome, demagogue and ICE agents calling for prisoners to get cut loose, calling for ICE agents to be assaulted. I think that will be a preview of coming attractions. And when they don't totally dismantle ICE, I think they'll vote against it. They're willing to shut the government down. It's all I can do. I'm against giving them 10 days. Let's call their bluff. I think the last time they shut the government down for 43 days, how did that work out? Not too good.
Republicans got the blame.
It didn't work out too good for them. They know that.
How did it work out for the American people for 43 days? Not very damn good.
No.
How did it work out for families that didn't make mortgage payments that they owed because the employed person in the family for the federal government didn't get paid? But by God, we expect you to come to work. We expect to be able to fly in and pontificate while you don't get paid, your car payment doesn't get paid, your rent doesn't get paid, and you worry about your family. That's real adult. So, we've got substantial agreement here. People can vote how they want to. I'm for getting those things done, like my friend, the ranking member. We can continue to work on this other deal. But, you tell me how it's logical to shut down the entire government of the United States, jeopardize millions of paychecks, not just public paychecks, but private too, because we do business with a lot of private business. And that's because we're upset about one thing over here, which we can deal with and have the instruments to deal with. But, again, we live in a superheated, super polarized age. But I don't think it's a logical response to the problem in front of us.
Well, you hit it on the head. It's not fair for the American people. The SNAP benefits that were denied during those 43 days in South Carolina, those people suffered for that. As Mr. Scott brought up, the Homeland Security is more than just ICE. They want to dismantle ICE. It's not going to happen. There is a strong contingency and growing. The minute they start all these outlandish demands, it's not going to happen. I'll reluctantly vote for, do you want me to finish? I will reluctantly vote for the rule and give them the stupid 10 days, and let's see how it plays out. It's going to get shut down. Let them bear the consequences. And I think they will, as they did before. So, but thank you for your hard work, or both of you for your hard work. We just have a total disagreement of what service is in this country and what leverage you'll use. For them, it's one word, power. And thank God the 77 million people aren't going to give it to them. I yield back.
Madam Chair,
Mr. McGovern.
just for the record, SNAP benefits were withheld, notwithstanding the fact that the money was there to pay for them. That was decided by the President of the
With all
United
due
States.
respect, there wasn't enough money for the month.
Yeah, well, there was more than enough,
what
there
there
was more than enough money to not stop that.
Okay, Mr. McGovern.
No,
It's okay.
but I mean, I just want that was the first time in history that ever happened.
Well, but with all due respect, the president went to the Supreme Court to deprive
Right.
people of food.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
okay.
That's how cruel he is.
Let's stick to the subject matter. Okay. Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Norman. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for coming today. I really, really appreciate the chairman setting the record straight on why we are here today and talking about the other body. And I almost wanted to cheer when the ranking member made her comments. I was not in Congress when Homeland Security was established either, Mr. Chairman, but I do remember the debates that went on in the country about this being a very ungainly, I think was the word you used, and it's a good word, of putting these disparate agencies together. And if anything good comes out of what's happening, although I think other good will come out of what's happened in Minnesota, I do expect other good things to happen. It really would be nice if we could look again at the composition of this committee and say, why are these things all put together here? It really is a very, very confusing issue, and I hope it will spur the American people to do a little understanding of where we are in the country with this various agencies put within this one committee. It does make it very difficult, I think, to administer it. And maybe it's time for us to look at a way to make some changes. And I hope long-term that's what happens. But I want to thank you all again. We didn't expect to be back here when we sent those bills over to the Senate. I thank you for the good work you've done. You've emphasized over and over again that these bills came to us as a result of the hard work of the subcommittee members. And as Ms. DeLauro said, it's nobody's perfect bill. These bills are nobody's perfect bill, but we live where we have to compromise. And I appreciate the good work that you all have done, and I'd like to get this process behind us so you can get started on next year's process, and hopefully it will turn out to be the right kind of process as you all want it to be. So I thank you all very much for being here today, and seeing no further questions. We appreciate your being here, and you are excused.
Thank you very much.
Okay, my dear. Let's just see what we got here. Take care.
Rosa, I hope your hand gets better
Thank you.
soon.
My granddaughter said, "Bubby, you have zombie fingers," but that's undone, so at least I can move my fingers these days. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Oh, sorry. Okay, get out of your way. Get out of your way.
Hey, how are you?
How are you, sir?
Hey, Ralph, how you doing, buddy?
I now welcome our second panel, Chairman Comer and Representative Walkinshaw from the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Comer, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern. I urge the Rules Committee to grant a prompt rule for the House's consideration of both the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find former President of the United States, William J. Clinton, in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with a subpoena duly issued by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find former Secretary of State Hillary R. Clinton in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with a subpoena duly issued by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Subpoenas are not mere suggestions. They carry the force of law and require compliance. Former President Clinton and former Secretary Clinton were legally required to appear for a deposition before the House Oversight Committee. They refused, and actions have consequences. Last July, Republicans and Democrats on the House Oversight Committee's Federal Law Enforcement Subcommittee unanimously approved a voice vote, a motion to subpoena former President Clinton and former Secretary Clinton for depositions as part of our investigation into the federal government's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell criminal cases. On August 5th, I issued subpoenas to them. The testimonies of President Clinton and Secretary Clinton are critical to understanding Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking network and the ways he sought to curry favor and influence to shield himself from scrutiny. In fact, then Secretary of State Clinton would have signed off on the annual Trafficking in Persons report. In 2010, under Secretary Clinton's tenure, that report began covering trafficking within the United States. Given her service as Secretary of State, she could provide firsthand information about the federal government's efforts to combat international sex trafficking. Their testimony may also inform how Congress can strengthen laws to better combat human trafficking. Since issuing the subpoenas, the Oversight Committee has acted in good faith. We've offered flexibility on scheduling. We've tried to accommodate. The response we received was not cooperation, but defiance, repeated delays, excuses, and obstruction. President Clinton and Secretary Clinton claimed to have been treated unfairly because the Oversight Committee accepted written statements under penalty of law from former U.S. Attorneys Gonzalez, Holder, Lynch, Sessions, and Garland, as well as former FBI Director Comey. Those written statements were accepted because none of those officials recalled any information relevant to the Epstein investigation, nor could we find any evidence that they did have personal relationships with Epstein. By contrast, the Oversight Committee required in-person testimony from former U.S. Attorney General Barr and former U.S. Secretary of Labor and U.S. Attorney Acosta, both Republicans, because they possessed information directly relevant to the investigation. The Clintons had documented relationships with Epstein and Maxwell, including President Clinton's trips with Epstein and Maxwell, evidenced by numerous photographs, flight log records, wedding invitations, and other materials. We repeatedly informed the Clintons' attorneys that a written statement would not be sufficient. The subpoenas required a deposition. Federal courts have consistently held that witnesses may not impose their own conditions upon the matter of congressional inquiry. Yet President Clinton and Secretary Clinton attempted to do exactly that, submitting a brief, bulleted written statement that was neither comprehensive nor responsive to the Oversight Committee's many unanswered questions. No person, not a former president or a private citizen, may willfully defy a duly issued congressional subpoena without consequence. And there can be no doubt that this bipartisan congressional subpoena was lawful and duly issued, as Ranking Member Garcia confirmed for the record during the committee's markup. The Clintons have flatly refused to appear at all, despite repeated warnings that the Oversight Committee would move forward with contempt proceedings. 2 weeks ago, the Oversight Committee voted on a bipartisan basis to hold both President Clinton and Secretary Clinton in contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with their subpoenas. President Clinton must be held accountable for his actions. Secretary Clinton must be held accountable for her actions. The Rules Committee and the full House must take this opportunity to uphold Congress's investigative authority. And we must do so to demonstrate to the American people that justice is applied equally to everyone, regardless of position, pedigree, or prestige. I also urge the Rules Committee to grant prompt rule for Representative Gill's House Joint Resolution 142, disapproving the action of the District of Columbia Council and approving the D.C. Income and Franchise Tax Conformity and Revision Temporary Amendment Act of 2025. As I've said many times before this committee, Congress has the constitutional right to review legislation passed by the D.C. Council under the D.C. Home Rule Act. It also has authority to block such legislation. In this case, it should do just that. In December this past year, the D.C. Council enacted, without the mayor's support, legislation that blocks corresponding tax relief for D.C. residents and businesses that is afforded them at the federal level by the Working Families Tax Cut Act. These reforms provide much-needed tax relief for both individuals and businesses, relief that keeps more of Americans' money where it belongs, in their pockets. However, the D.C. Council has cherry-picked pieces of these federal tax reforms and decided to just ignore the application in the local tax code. The tax provisions they have chosen not to implement in the D.C. tax code include no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for senior citizens, no tax on auto loan interest. This hurts seniors and hardworking American families, and that's just the start of it. They've also cut various tax credits for D.C. local businesses, including research and development and manufacturing incentives, stifling them from growing their local economy. The House must swiftly exercise its constitutional responsibility to oversee the District of Columbia and stop this misguided legislation from going into effect. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to unite in the support of D.C. taxpayers and businesses and support this necessary resolution of disapproval. Again, I ask the Rules Committee to grant a prompt rule for the House's consideration of these measures, and I welcome the committee's questions. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Comer. Mr. Walkinshaw, can you hold on just 1 second?
Sure.
I can't figure out where that pounding noise is coming from. No. I'm sure it's distracting to me. I don't want it to be distracting to you all. We thought it might be coming from your mics. That's why I wanted to.
I'm missing a piece. It could be.
Oh, yeah, he's missing the,
There it came. That could have been it. No, okay.
My mic's turned off. If it's still.
Yeah, we'll see. It went away for a second, and then when you spoke, I think it did come back. I think that was the issue.
Could be.
Because it's not there anymore. Okay.
All right, we have enough.
All right, we'll just switch out. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Walkinshaw, please, you're
Okay.
recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. This is my first time before this august committee. I got the full experience here over the last hour listening to you all. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in opposition to HJ Res 142, which would create chaos during tax season for 700,000 taxpaying Americans here in the District of Columbia, and in opposition to the Clinton criminal contempt resolutions, which would bring congressional Republicans one step closer to realizing their decades-long fever dream of locking up Secretary Hillary Clinton. By nullifying a law passed unanimously by the D.C. Council, HJ Res 142 would force D.C. to freeze its tax season, rewrite guidance, update forms, and coordinate changes with private tax preparers. Chairman Comer and my Republican colleagues are frustrated that D.C. has not conformed its tax law to the so-called Big Beautiful Bill and laments that D.C. residents will pay taxes on their tips. The chairman knows that his home, the second best Commonwealth in the nation, my apologies to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, has also not conformed its tax code to the bill. In fact, Kentucky has regularly failed to conform to the Internal Revenue Code. Mr. Chairman, if you earned any tips last year, You'll be paying Kentucky taxes on them this year. Passage of HJ Res 142 would also risk a downgrade in DC's credit rating, as the rating agencies know that this Congress knows not a thing about fiscal responsibility and are deeply concerned if we engage in this kind of meddling. As I've said to Chairman Comer and my Oversight Republican colleagues before, if you want to micromanage the District of Columbia, the best thing to do is run for mayor or city council. I oppose this resolution and urge my colleagues to do the same. This week is a critical one in Oversight Democrats' efforts to deliver the transparency and accountability that the American people and the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific crimes deserve. While President Trump has done everything in his power, including summoning members of this body to the White House Situation Room for scheduled browbeating to prevent the truth from coming to light, Oversight Democrats forced a vote to subpoena the full Epstein files and have been crystal clear that we want to talk to anyone, regardless of party, who has information about Epstein's crimes. And while President Trump's Justice Department continues to hide nearly half of the Epstein files in violation of the law, Chairman Comer and this Congress face a choice with respect to President Clinton. We can choose door number one. Through that door, our investigation into Epstein's crimes moves forward, with the Oversight Committee conducting a 4-hour interview with President Clinton. He has agreed. This kind of interview with a former president is very rare in the history of our republic. But given the horrific and sprawling nature of Epstein's crimes and the need to fully understand the facts, Oversight Democrats believe it to be necessary. But Chairman Comer is dead set on choosing door number two. And through door number two lies a politicized criminal contempt vote sent to a politicized Trump Department of Justice, very likely to die in court months or years from now. That door involves no interview or additional information from President Clinton, information that could advance our investigation. So the question before us is this: do we want to advance our investigation by interviewing President Clinton, or do we want to play politics? I would submit, Madam Chairwoman, the American people are tired of Epstein politics. They want us to get to the truth. I yield back.
Thank you both very much for your statements. I'm going to defer my questions, and Mr. Scott, I wonder if Mr. Scott has no questions. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
So I have two sets of questions, Madam Chair, because we have two bills coming up here at once. So let me start with the D.C. bill. Chairman Comer, has your committee held a hearing or a markup on this measure?
We have not, because in order to rescind the D.C. Council motion, you're on a time frame 30 days.
This was introduced 11 days ago.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
I have a limited amount of time here. And has Congress ever vetoed a local D.C. tax law before?
Yes. We did House Joint Resolution 42 last Congress. Isn't that right? About,
Mr. Walkinshaw?
was it the...
I think
that's incorrect. We have not.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's unprecedented. So since this measure has received zero public consideration by the U.S. Congress, and you want the House to vote on it this week, and Congress has never interfered with a local D.C. tax law before, let's at least spend a few minutes evaluating what it would do. Can you tell me the size of D.C.'s budget for fiscal year 2026? It's $22 billion.
Okay.
And how much of that is covered by the projected revenue raised from D.C., from local D.C. taxes?
We've worked very closely on the Oversight Committee with Mayor Bowser in trying to recruit industry.
The answer is $13 billion.
And private investment.
And what is D.C.'s capital budget for fiscal year 2026, which is used to invest in things like the metro, public schools, and public infrastructure?
I'll have to go through my notes. It may take a minute.
$2.6 billion. How have D.C. revenue projections over the next 4 years been impacted by the mass layoffs of federal employees by the Trump administration? Do you know, Mr.?
They've been negatively impacted.
Yeah, we're told,
All I know, Mr.
Revenue
McGovern, is
estimates
we've
were-
worked with the mayor to try to get the federal employees back to work, something
Revenue
that she
estimates were
supported.
revised downward by $1 billion, $1 billion. So if we overturn DC's new tax law, do you know what the fiscal impact of that decision will be on DC's budget? I mean, according to DC's chief financial officer, that would blow a $600 million hole in the budget. And, you know, I raise these issues, and again, I mean, you know, I agree, I mean, that if you really want to micromanage DC, you should run for city council, because clearly, I don't think, you're coming here knowing the first thing about DC's budget process and fiscal situation, and I think Republicans in Congress think they know better than DC's elected officials about these very technical local tax and budget decisions, but blowing a huge hole in their budget, I mean, seriously? I mean, you guys can't even manage the federal budget, which is your actual job. I mean, you guys just voted for this big ugly bill which adds $4 trillion to the federal debt. And you're going to tell DC how to run their government? I want to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record, Madam Chair, a letter signed by the mayor, Muriel Bowser, and chairman of the council of the District of Columbia, Phil Mendelson.
Without objection.
One quote here. The district is already a month into the 2026 tax year and has begun accepting and processing tax returns. Disapproval at this stage would create huge administrative challenges, require taxpayers to refile their taxes, render existing guidance and forms obsolete, and necessitate rapid mid-year changes to tax administration systems. This is insane. This doesn't make any sense. So, Madam Chair, I really am frustrated that this is what we're going to spend our time doing this week. You know, a bill that's going to create more chaos in the district. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, to the second bill that we're here to talk about. You know, President Trump referred to efforts to uncover the facts about the Epstein issue as I'm going to quote him, a hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, end quote. And he instructed Attorney General Bondi to investigate Democrats, including President Clinton, and that's exactly what this is all about. My Republican friends, you know, say that they are interested in getting to the truth of the Epstein files. I'm on the Rules Committee. We moved 9 times to try to get an amendment considered on the House floor to release the files. And the way we actually had a vote on it was through a discharge petition, because all of you blocked it.
That's not true. That's not,
You blocked it. You
I
blocked it.
subpoenaed Pam Bondi for the Epstein
You blocked
documents.
it. Yeah. It is true. You did block it. You did block it. 9 times in this committee, we voted to make that an amendment in order, and it was blocked. In addition to the Clintons, 6 other people were also subpoenaed. Attorney General Barr, she came in to testify. The rest, including the Clintons, all sent in written declarations. Yet this contempt resolution singles them out for partisan reasons. They are actively negotiating with the committee to provide testimony, most recently offering to sit for a transcribed interview, which I guess Chairman Comer has rejected, because this isn't really actually about getting at the facts. It's about playing politics. It's about creating a spectacle. We all know what's going on. Mr. Walkinshaw, isn't this just a political exercise to change the subject away from Trump's involvement in the Epstein files? By the way, the incomplete release of the Epstein files up to this point, Donald Trump has mentioned 5,391 times. 5,391 times.
Yeah.
And not one word about even asking the president to voluntarily come up and answer questions, but I'll yield to you.
I think it's really important to remind the American people about the timeline of President Trump's involvement here. We all know he ran for the presidency in 2024, saying he was going to release the files. Shortly after being sworn in, his attorney general claimed to have a binder with the client list, and she was going to release the files. At some point, very quickly, President Trump changed his tune. He started doing everything in his power to prevent the release of the files. We know, based on reporting, the Attorney General told him that he was mentioned in the files. We now know thousands of times he's mentioned in the file. So I think
You know thousands of times because he released the files.
half of them. He released half of them only when he was forced to, after doing everything in his power to prevent it.
Is there an update on the Clintons?
And I can share an update. The good news, Mr. Chairman, I think we'll be able to go through door number one that I outlined in my opening statement. I understand that the Clintons have agreed to appear for depositions and have agreed to the terms that you laid out in your most recent
Are
letter.
you aware of that?
No.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case.
Somehow the media and the Democrats get the correspondence way before we do.
Well, my understanding is that their
Yeah,
attorneys reached out to you.
Your staff has
Yeah,
it, Mr. Chairman.
You better check with your staff. But if that's the case, why are we doing this then?
If the staff has it, they just got it, because we've been in there waiting for you all to stop talking on the last bill so we could present this bill. And look, you
You
said
can multitask.
transcribe,
You don't have
they
to.
rejected a transcribe, he wanted a transcribed interview. The difference in a transcribed interview and deposition, you don't have to answer the questions in a transcribed interview.
Great, but.
They've agreed to the terms in your letter,
I would
Mr.
suggest that you consult with your staff. Maybe Mr. Walkinshaw can maybe make sure that you're.
Yeah, we'll make sure you
My
get-
understanding is that your staff has been notified of this.
If they've been
So, like, this is
notified,
the-
it's been in the last 15 minutes.
Mr. McGovern, yeah, Mr. McGovern, it just has come out in the last, I just received a note.
In the last 2
the
minutes.
last-
Right, well, then,
Yeah.
can we save it? Can we save all?
No,
all
no,
the-
no. Just because we're
right,
going to
well,
have to review this and look at this. And look, this sets a bad precedent. So every time we issue a subpoena, and what Mr. Walkinshaw does not say is the Democrats made the motion for all these subpoenas. This was a Democrat motion, and a majority of the Democrats on the committee voted for
we
this
wanna
subpoena.
hear from everyone.
So you're trying to say it's
wanna hear from
partisan,
everyone.
and it's not
Reclaim
partisan.
my time, Madam Chair.
It's bipartisan.
So, in other words, you're getting everything you want, but you still want to go ahead with the show.
You're talking
this
about something nobody's
this is
even read yet,
this is
Mr.
so ri-
McGovern.
All right, let me, so in the recent DOJ release of the Epstein files, there appears to be far more information about prominent people in Epstein's circle, including Donald Trump, Melania Trump, Elon Musk, and Howard Lutnick. Chairman Comer, do you know if top Trump advisor Elon Musk ever went to Epstein's rape island?
I haven't seen any evidence that he had.
Do you know?
But,
Trump-
look, if anybody that's been to the island, especially if
I
they went to the
reclaim my
island
time.
after he's convicted,
Madam Chair,
we're
I mean,
interested in
I
talking to
reclaim my
them.
time. Do you know if Trump advisor Steve Bannon ever went to Epstein's rape
I
island?
don't keep up with Steve
Yes, sir.
Bannon.
All right, do you know if Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, ever went to Epstein's rape island?
He has said he went to the island with his wife and kids and would never go back. He
So-
went somewhere. I don't know if it's
so-
the island, but he went somewhere with Epstein.
He said that before. Yeah, so you don't want to subpoena them? Or don't you care to learn if they? ever
I've
went to
subpoenaed the
Wait,
former
wait.
Republican Attorney General Bill Barr for a hard-hitting deposition, and we subpoenaed Alex Acosta, who served in the Trump administration.
subpoena anything?
How many Republicans did Jamie Raskin subpoena when he has? How
So
many
the answer is no.
Republicans did the
So the answer
Democrats
is no, you
subpoena?
don't care. I
This is a
reclaim-
bipartisan investigation.
it's my
That's
time,
why a
Madam
majority of
Chair.
Democrats
I'm sorry.
on the Oversight
I'm
Committee
sorry.
voted for this.
It's my time, Mr.
Chairman
Chair.
Comer,
You
Chairman.
can spread all the propaganda you want in your committee, but it's my time in this committee, and I'm asking the questions. So the answer is no, that you're not going to subpoena.
I don't even know
these
what the
people.
question is.
It was very, are you going to subpoena Howard Lutnick or Steve Bannon or Elon Musk?
We'll subpoena anyone that the evidence leads us
Is that
to.
yes? Lutnick
If the
went to
evidence,
island.
we'll talk about it with the committee. And we don't just pull subpoenas out of our butts
Chairman-
like Jamie Raskin
I
would
reclaim my
do.
time. Chairman Comer, the Oversight Committee issued a subpoena to Attorney General Bondi more than 5 months ago.
I subpoenaed Pam Bondi for
requiring her to
the
produce-
Epstein
Excuse me,
documents.
Madam Chair, can you muzzle the witness, please? I mean, Chairman Comer, the Oversight Committee issued a subpoena to Attorney General Bondi more than 5 months ago, requiring her to produce all of the Epstein files to Congress by August 19th, 2025. Yes or no? As of right now, has Attorney General Bondi fully complied with the subpoena?
We're still reviewing the 3 million documents to see if that's all of the
So answer
documents or
is
not.
no.
It's important.
Just 1 minute, if I could. I'm going to ask you all not to talk over each other, but I do have a question something I'd like to ask, if you'd let me real
Absolutely.
quickly.
Happy to
Yeah,
yield
real
to the
quickly.
chair.
Thank you. People keep saying, have all the files been released? Does somebody have a total?
No.
Of the files? How is anybody ever going to know how many files?
Madam
there
Chair,
are?
when this started,
Mr.
5 or
Walker?
6 months ago, it was suggested that there were between 100 and 300,000 files. We've already had released over 3.1 million files.
Okay, now, Mr.
Mr.
McGovern.
Waukesha, why don't you respond,
The
please?
direct answer to your question, Madam Chairwoman, is yes, we do have a number. And we have a number because the Trump administration, the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, said there are 6 million files. They collected 6 million files. Now, he says they over-collected, so they've only released 3 million. The law does not allow them to subjectively determine that 3 million of the Epstein files that are in his possession, which he said were over-collected. Mr. McGovern, though, asked a question about the Oversight Committee's subpoena and the Attorney General's compliance with that subpoena. That's separate from the release of files that we've seen publicly, because the Oversight Committee's subpoena does not have the same list of allowed redactions that the legislation that we all voted for has. She's produced to this committee only 30,000 pages of documents, not 3 million, not 6 million. She's out of compliance with the subpoena and not following the law requiring the release of all 6 million documents.
But can we talk about this? I'm interested in getting to a number. So, well, I'm curious, okay, so she's released over 3 million, you said, Mr. Chairman.
She just released 3 million in addition to the I don't know, 30-something thousand a few months ago.
And Mr. McGovern, you said we know the number? Is that what you said?
Mr.
The Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, President Trump's former personal lawyer, said that there are 6 million files. He's choosing to release only 3 million, and he's choosing to heavily redact that 3 million.
So should we hold Pam Bondi in contempt?
What she is turning over documents, and what they said is they turned over documents, every document that they're legally required to turn over,
I don't think she's complying with the subpoena.
that
She's
they're
certainly not complying with the law.
allowed by law to turn over.
Well, all right.
There's still investigations, there's class action lawsuits, there's a lot of legal stuff still taking place with this, but we want the documents. We want everything. We're reviewing the 3 million. I don't think anybody can say with honesty they've read all 3 million of them. We're pouring through them as quick as we can.
I'm worried about the 3 million that haven't been released. And do we know what's in those 3 million pages that haven't been released?
We do not know.
Have we heard from, have you, because I've been reading the public, I've been reading public statements, but I want to know whether you have heard from Epstein's victims and survivors about the recent release by DOJ? Have you heard of some of the concern of some of the survivors who believe that DOJ is deliberately releasing personal information about them?
See, that's...
And while at the same time protecting the men that abuse these women?
You want to answer?
It's deeply concerning. I mean, look, the most recent release, we heard from the Department of Justice that they couldn't follow the law because they were taking so much time to carefully scrutinize the files and ensure they did the appropriate redactions to protect the survivors. And then we hear from survivor after survivor after survivor after survivor who was revealed in the release. So they delayed the release to protect the survivors, so they say, and then they failed to protect the survivors when they released half of the files that the law
And the
requires.
interesting thing is that the names that really weren't released are the perpetrators, are the people who abused these women. So again, they victimized, again, the survivors, and they're protecting the people, who abused them. I got to say that, Republicans on the Oversight Committee have moved swiftly to hold the Clintons
And Democrats.
in criminal contempt, yet several Republican members of the Oversight Committee notably refused to comply with congressional subpoenas from the January 6th committee. Maybe, Chairman Cohen, do you think your own members should have been held in contempt and prosecuted?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because there's been a lot of speculation in our Minnesota fraud investigation that there may be a Democrat member from Minnesota that net worth has significantly increased. What we found out, we can't investigate other members. That has to be the Ethics Committee. So if there was an issue with the January 6th committee subpoenaing members of Congress, which I've been told we're not supposed to do, then they should take it up with the Ethics Committee, because that's their sole purpose, is to investigate other members.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering whether we should recess for 5 or 10 minutes so that you can figure out what the Clinton development is, so we maybe can save ourselves a whole bunch of time.
Well, may I ask you a
on the
question,
House
Mr.
floor.
McGovern? Is this going to be the standard practice every time we issue a subpoena? Whoever's in charge, Democrats, Republicans, whoever's in control, every time you issue a subpoena, letting them stonewall for 5 months and then prove that you've got the votes on the floor in a bipartisan fashion to hold them in contempt? Then
No, I mean, I think what the danger here is that the Clintons weren't negotiating in good faith, and you jumped to this.
For
to this thing
5
right here.
months?
Just
Mr.
say,
Walker,
we have seen Chairman Comer has repeatedly moved the goalposts here.
Oh, that's
At our
bull crap. That is
markup,
not
it's
true.
my
You've
time.
been here
You
3
weren't
weeks.
asked the
You don't,
question.
hey, that's
You
not
weren't asked
true,
the
Madam
question, Mr. Chairman. At our markup, the chairman,
Reporters can't hear you, so, just a moment. You made an accusation, Mr. Walkinshaw.
I'm trying to
That
complete
the
my statement.
Republicans moved the goalposts.
That's right. I'm going to
How
explain
can you
that.
back that up?
I'll back it up this way. We had a markup a couple weeks ago on these contempt resolutions. The chairman laid out his objections to the Clintons' most recent offer at that time. He didn't like that they hadn't agreed to a transcription. He didn't like that they wanted to limit the amount of committee staff in the room. They had said that he hadn't agreed to limit the discussion to Epstein-related matters. He claimed at the time that was untrue, and he did want to limit the discussion to Epstein-related matters. All of those objections that the chairman laid out at our markup a couple of weeks ago were addressed by the offer that the Clintons made yesterday. We now know the additional objections that the chairman laid out in a recent letter have been addressed by the Clintons and their lawyers. So if we're going to continue to move forward, despite the fact that they have met everything you've asked them to meet, I think we've revealed what's actually happening.
And so the question is, are we interested in getting to the truth and the facts, or are my friends interested in creating a spectacle? Or is this all about, no, this, I'll say, we have been on this, Democrats on this committee have tried 9 times to bring, a resolution to the floor to release the Epstein files. Only when public pressure, forced you to cave on it, finally, did we have a vote on it. And now we have a Department of Justice that is half complying.
Mr. McGovern, let me tell you, I agree with you that we should take a recess.
Okay.
So that we can review the recent developments. That's all I was trying to say to you, is I think that we should do that. The rules have been called, votes have been called, and so I think we should go vote and return 10 minutes after the last vote.
And I get to finish my questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can we start at the end?
If you won't take another 20 minutes, although I've taken some of your
Can
time.
we start at the beginning of the last? Yeah, the beginning of the last vote. Can we do that?
Beginning of last vote.
Okay, thank you.
If that is giving you all enough time, perhaps they might have something to say at that time. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I want to thank Chairman Comer and Mr. Walkinshaw and the others who are here. We're now going to recess, and committee's going to recess until after